The ancestors, they sing to me like a siren song. The ancestors, they call my name all the whole day long. The ancestors, they sing to me in a siren song. The strings of hope, they cling to me and they make me strong.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Hidden History Happy Hour. Now, we promised you a full crew this time, and we've doubled it. So we've delivered 200% of your expectations. Hidden History Happy Hour viewers, you may have noticed that our theme song today is not the usual theme song. It is, in fact, a very moving piece of music that relates directly to our guests today, Terry and Jeffrey, and their project. And so I urge you to go back and listen to more of it. Alex Dean, my friend, welcome back. Cheers.
Cheers. Good to be with you. Champagne for me in the Dean household. When you get married, suddenly the house is full of it. Cheers, everybody.
Well, we were told by our expert guest that we should have ardent spirits today. So I have accomplished that. Now, for those of you who don't recognize these two fantastic gentlemen on your screen, you do actually recognize Terry Franklin because he was on almost exactly to the day this time last year, but it was audio only. So this is how Terry looks. And look how well dressed he is. He's so embarrassing us, right, Alex?
All right. Terry, great to have you back.
Great to have you back. Terry, why don't you introduce your collaborator there? I don't mean that in the French Resistance sense.
No, in the other sense. This is my husband, Jeffrey Moline.
Hey, Jeffrey.
My artistic collaborator on many of my activities. So,
cheers.
Jeffrey,
and congratulations on
have you with us.
Putting up with Terry. Very, very, very impressive. So, ladies and gentlemen,
do it, yeah.
It's an ugly job, but it has to be done. So, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get to the exciting projects that Terry and Jeffrey are working on, but a couple of preliminary matters. One, please check in the show notes. Look at our Evite for our live episode in London coming up on 23 February, right? If you guys feel free to fly over and join us if you like. Happy to have you there.
Our daughter's there.
Everyone who signs up via the Evite gets a signed copy of Alex's book. If you bring your own book, we're not a profit-making show here. If you bring your own copy.
Generosity itself.
Yes, but everyone should show up whether you bring a book or not. Now, I'm going to reintroduce Terry Franklin because it was almost, as I said, a year ago today when he appeared on the podcast. So excited about what Terry is going to discuss today because I've known about these projects ever since they were just, I don't know, a trial balloon in Terry's mind. And speaking of balloons, let's talk about that Chinese spy balloon, huh? Now, look, there's a lot of posers on the interweb saying a lot of things that are frankly Bravo Sierra, as we used to say in the government. I want to give you an intelligence officer's perspective, and then I want to hear what other people think about it. And here's my perspective. If we were able to block the transmission of any information from the balloon back to the People's Republic of China during the time it was over our airspace, and we succeeded in shooting it down and recovering the technology from 47 feet of water in the Atlantic, that's a win, period, full stop from an intelligence standpoint. However, there is also a propaganda/political issue here too, and that is, what message does it send the rest of the world? And let's be honest, the West is in a great power competition with the Chinese, that they were able to move their balloon all the way across the continental United States, all over sensitive sites, without us shooting us down. Again, as a pure intelligence matter, I would say it's still worth it. But Alex, from a political standpoint, how do you see it?
Well, you've framed the debate in the right way, I think, because on the one hand, I understand President Biden saying his advisors were saying, wait until it's over somewhere safe to be shot down. It's not getting any more intelligence than it would otherwise have. But on the other hand, it was a grievous invasion of your airspace.
Yeah.
And, some interpretations, an act of war, depending on what you consider the balloon to be. That's a weird debate to get into, but, what does balloon constitute might be such an area of discussion. For me, the fact that they were able to do what they did is bad, notwithstanding the fact that it's quite difficult to speculate about what meaningfully you can obtain from a balloon rather than, say, satellites, which people are using to spy on each other all the time. That said, it's just the latest incursion. Many businesses will have visiting dignitary protocols, which is a polite way of saying put the computers away when people from certain countries come around, because they stick what we call USB sticks, you call thumb drives, into computers just to see what they can get. Quite often, for example, the person on the front desk at a business, the receptionist, the secretary, is the PA to the CEO, or at least has access to that person's diary. And from such small beginnings, they are able to hack into a network. So from the very smallest level of human intelligence to the very most significant level of espionage in the heavens, we are being spied upon by those who wish us ill. And the balloon example was simply a more novel and more obvious example of that.
And visual, right? I mean, the American people could see that and understand it. I mean, I'm sure by all accounts, the Office of Personnel Management hacked by China during the Obama administration, which took 26 million top secret classified security files, including mine, thank you very much, was a much bigger intelligence coup for the Chinese than this. But this is a thing. Like, people in Montana could look up and see it and realize it wasn't ours. And on that note, I would just note my favorite internet meme going around about this is a headline captioned, spy balloon from Germany over Milwaukee. And it's just a giant stein of beer superimposed onto a balloon. But Terry and Jeffrey, I know you're not steeped in national security, but how does this land for you guys as just Americans that saw this happening?
I guess I probably have too much trust in our national intelligence apparatus, but I kind of imagine that maybe they knew about it before we knew about it. And so you correct me, Bryan, if you think, because it seems to me that we probably had some idea that it was there once it entered our airspace. I can't believe that it made it all the way to Montana before anybody knew, but you tell me. It isn't frightening that it has just come right into our country and right over our heads. But as you say, we're being spied on all the time. So I don't know what is the right level of anxiety I should have about this.
Well, as we're recording this on 7 February 2023, it's coming out now in dribs and drabs that this is not the first time this has happened. And most alarming thing about the whole incident for me is a Pentagon official, I forget if they were named or they just were on background, said, yeah, this happened at least a couple times in the Trump administration, but we had an awareness gap. Like, I guess if you fly between 50 and 90,000 feet, we're not going to see it. I don't know. That is troubling, and that needs to be looked into. But to me, I'm sure they didn't gather anything that they couldn't have gathered from their satellites. So to me, the real question is, they did this. They knew we were going to find out. They did it on the eve of Secretary Blinken's visit. Did they intend this to be a way to show Africa, Latin America, everywhere we're competing, they can do whatever they want? If they did, then I would hope we will be able to marshal the shoot down and the successful recovery of all their stuff as a way to say, you guys aren't so smart after all.
Well, look, it's by no means the weirdest espionage trick in our lifetimes, and it's balloons are pretty conventional. So I haven't written this yet, but it may appear in volume 3 should Bite Back be willing.
Hister 3, the acoustic kitty campaign by your organization, the CIA, Bryan, in the 1960s, sent cats that were wired for sound out into the fields around I say the field, like the area around the Soviet embassy in the US, to try to pick up on the conversations being had by junior Soviet officials having cigarettes outside and meeting people on park benches. Unfortunately, the first cat they'd wired for sound, they operated on a cat and put, receivers in its head and a wire down its back. I'm sure it was quite unpleasant for the cat. That's cold.
Not as much as
Moscow.
Yeah, not as quite Moscow, indeed, Meowscow. What happened next was you released the cat to go and have a snoop around the park, and it probably got run over by a cab. So,
release the cats.
Yeah, or don't release the cats, as it turns out. Much more rapid resolution than Balloon Gate. But I revert to the point: if it was not getting anything, then waiting until it's in a safe place to shoot it down is actually quite a calm and sensible thing to have done. It's quite a mature thing for the administration. And I'm no huge admirer of the Biden administration. It seems to me that's a very sensible thing for them to have done.
And we're collecting counterintelligence the whole way because we know what it's trying to transmit back. Although, if you want to really go deep into the Hall of Mirrors,
Is that definitely right that you can?
No, because if you want to go deep into the Hall of Mirrors, if we were able to stop them from transmitting and they knew we stopped them from transmitting, they would stop trying to transmit. So I don't know. This will all come out sooner or later. But I want to just pick up on your point, Alex, and then we'll get to Terry and Jeffrey's great musical performance. Another first here on the Hidden History Happy Hour, our first musical performance is in my early days as a CIA officer. We were deeply involved in the negotiations in which the Soviet Union was able to position their new embassy in Washington on what's called Mount Alta, which is the highest point geographically in Washington. This was under Carter. Reagan came in, he ordered the thing torn down. But the interesting thing related to Alex's point is the site was also across the street from one of the bawdiest and most popular, well, how will I say, exotic dancing establishments in the District of Columbia. And so you can't imagine the number of CIA officers, I'm not fessing up to this, who put on their expense reports.
I went to this club.
Scouting for KGB officers. Now, I'm not saying that Alex's mention of cats and my mention of a strip club are connected, but you can draw your own conclusions.
Well, look, if you're doing that kind of expense report, you've really got to commit because, you know, just going in for one beer is not adequate field work.
Not at all.
You've really got to go, you've got to go 10 beers deep in that before you can say you've failed to find a Soviet, haven't you?
Excellent surveillance requires persistence. That's all I'm going to say. And I think that's enough on the balloon, except Jeffrey has something on the balloon.
I feel like it's interesting that we are being surveilled constantly by corporations who are taking our information. And so I feel like people are not really protective of their information. They don't think this thing is going to happen to them and that their information will be out or be used in such a way.
Jeffrey, we are kindred spirits, you and I. I agree about these concerns about our privacy, not least because in the UK in the last week, we have found out that an arm of our military, which was established in order to surveil foreign powers for hostile acts, has been surveilling domestic political activists on this occasion because they were saying things that were contrary to the government's position on coronavirus policy. Now, whatever you think of my government and whatever you think of the government's position on coronavirus, it's plainly wrong for an arm of the military to be surveilling citizens of our own country and conducting that surveillance in order to, because they people who disagree with the government. One, by the way, was a sitting member of parliament. Wow. You know, so surveilling the legislature and people who've been elected to hold the government to account. They were surveilling people because they disagree with government, and were always assured it's for your own good. Don't question too much. You know, don't you dare. You know your place. It's all for your own good. And if we don't watch the watchers, then we will find that our freedoms have been eliminated, and right quick, because people don't ever come to you and say, I'm trying to stamp out free speech. I'm trying to control what information people get. They come and say, I'm trying to deal with misinformation, and you would approve of that, wouldn't you? It just so happens that we've labeled this thing that disagrees with government policy misinformation. So you and I are on the same page, my friend.
Next thing you know, they're going to send these technologies after how you empty or don't empty your rubbish bins.
Yeah, that's a throwback to a Big Brother Watch campaign more than 10
and
years
ago. Just as a reminder to all of our fans who may not have dived deep into Alex's background, Alex and I met because Alex at a very young age was the founder of Big Brother Watch in the UK, a privacy, depending on how you pronounce it, activist organization. And so Alex is, you know, he's conservative on a lot of things, but he circles around back to the Rand Paul wing when it comes to civil liberties, just by way of background. I know that's not exactly a parallel.
Interesting shorthand. Yeah. Well, look, just to finish that point about what's happened in my country, of course, the killer point is that when asked, because these people thought they were being surveilled by government, right? They asked whether this was happening, and our military and our government lied and lied and lied about it. And that's, if they think they're doing the right thing, and if they believe it's all for your own good, you might speculate as to why they would lie to journalists who are asking about it. And I rather imagine it's because they knew that what they were doing was wrong. And of course, in my country, we've got a long history of this stuff, not least revealed by Snowden in what we found out there about mass surveillance of people. And the interesting thing, Jeffrey, and I wonder what you think. The interesting thing for me, though, is I worry more about government than corporations because of the power that government has over us.
In like putting you in jail.
Yeah, corporations can be what they find out about us can be unwarranted, and we may not wish them to have that information, but they don't have coercive powers in the same way, and that's why, in the end, I still fear the state the most.
I think that corporations and the government are kind of working hand in hand with this whole thing, is what I think. I feel like keep people consuming and obfuscating what reality is, and controlling.
Well, I'm not so sure about the direct collaboration, but the point I was going to make, which is sort of the same, is at least in the United States, anything a corporation can collect can be subpoenaed or collected by the government through a proper legal procedure. So this sort of division between what Google does and what NSA does always has struck me as sort of BS, because we can get that anyway if we go through the proper legal procedure.
So the counterpoint to that conversation, with which I have sympathy, is that when we saw the internal material this is before Elon Musk bought Twitter, but when we saw the internal conversations that people in the Twitter hierarchy were having about your government telling them to shut down accounts because they were saying things government disagreed with, there was at least more pushback amongst the executives in Twitter, which is an organization that I have all sorts of issues with, but they were at least having a debate about whether or not they should curtail free speech. And that was not the position being taken by the Biden administration, which was shut down people who take positions contrary to ours on broad areas of public policy, like should we vaccinate or not, should we lock down and shut down the economy or not. My point would be these are big principled policy debates on which reasonable people can reasonably disagree, and saying that you're going to disallow the other side of the debate from being able to speak is wrong. And at least the guys at Twitter were a bit better on, this is small, it's a low hurdle, right? But at least they were a bit better on trying to preserve freedom of speech than the government that was telling them to shut down accounts.
Fair. All right. Well, let's jump back 200 years, shall we? And Terry, could you recap our listeners? So Terry was literally our first guest on the Hidden History Happy Hour almost exactly a year ago today, and told the compelling story of his ancestor, Lucy Sutton, and also how he discovered his ancestor, Lucy Sutton. But this Lucy verse, as I like to call it, has expanded so much since we talked to you last time. Terry, tell us briefly the story of Lucy and then everything you guys are doing about her now.
Welcome to the Lucy verse.
The Lucy verse.
Yeah, so you coined it, so now I'm going to use it forever and ever. But
copyright.
Yes, the story is that I'd been a trust and estates litigator, doing will contests, family disputes, things like that, for about a quarter of a century, when I discovered that my great-great-great-great-grandfather, who was a white farmer in Florida, owned my great-great-great-great-grandmother, but he did a will that set her free along with their 8 children and their 6 grandchildren.
This is the 1810s?
1846 is when he died. Okay. So the will was done in 1846, and the family had to, after he died, find their way to try to make it to freedom. But his brother challenged the will after John died and came in and basically said John was too old, too drunk, and too crazy to have set these people free. This is valuable property. And so he tried to challenge the will to try to keep the family in slavery. And I've been unwinding bits and pieces of this story because the universe has brought all these elements together to help me be in a position to share how Lucy made her way to freedom with her 8 kids and 6 grandkids, and the story of the will contest, the challenge that we've been trying to tell all over the world. And what I've determined is my mission is to bend the arc of history towards justice by telling this story and other stories like it.
Well, I remember when I first heard this story from you, and we talked about it a year ago, that when you were figuring out how to write the story, when you knew only bits and pieces of it, you said to yourself as a writer and a storyteller, man, we need a villain in this story. We need an adversary. And I forget what you named the fictional person, but Shadrach is the real person, right?
He named him Eustace.
Yes, right.
One afternoon, Terrence came home from work, and he said, he'd been having these mystical experiences when he had just learned about the will, like waking me up at 4:44 in the morning, speaking gibberish, and he would wake me up, and then he would wake up shortly after. I would say, "Hey, who are you talking to?" And he would say, "I don't know. It was John or Lucy. They say there's more to this story." And he said, "I'm going to write this story. I'm a trust and estates litigator. I'm going to create a will contest. I'm going to create this evil uncle who's going to try to own my family." And then we get down to look at the will, and what happens?
There it is. We open the file, and the old-timey name of Eustace that we'd chosen turned out to be Shadrach. So yeah, Shadrach.
That's amazing. So you put the story out there in the world. I know that you have a podcast. We'll put this in the show notes where you talk about it, but it's expanded into multimedia, right? Since then.
Yeah, truly the mission is to tell the story as widely as I possibly can, and so I've had a chance to share it on places like this podcast, a bunch of other podcasts, and then I had a great opportunity, thanks to a producer of this show who helped introduce me to the TEDx Davenport folk, and I actually got a chance to do a podcast, a TED talk, TEDx talk last summer. Bending the arc of history towards justice. So we traveled out to Davenport, Iowa, and spent a couple of days there. My parents drove in 3 hours from Chicago, and
nice.
A great crowd showed up. So I've been sharing that podcast, the TED Talk, wherever I can. But we also were approached by a friend who works with the Oakland Symphony Chorus. She's one of the development people, and she knew about the Lucy story. And she'd been trying to think of creative ways to support and invest in it. And as it turns out, the Oakland Symphony Chorus was willing to basically commission us to create a musical piece. And so we have, working together with Jeffrey, my husband, who's a singer-songwriter, and a great musical director, Ringo Maestro, who has a long history with R&B groups and gospel.
Church music too, as well. Yeah.
Amazing. We put together this Lucy Sutton suite, and we call it a truth-telling in 4 parts, and it's about a 20-minute piece. We haven't figured out exactly when it's going to be performed by the chorus, but we're very excited because it's been, for me at least, to create a musical.
Of course, yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, that sounds amazing. And as I think you know, Terry, I have 2 daughters that are deeply into musical theater. And so I have been dragged to more musical theater performances than I can care to remember. And as a professional drummer, I always enjoy it. But, to get the most pure, unadulterated version of the song, I think you just want the spoken word. So I'm hoping that we can persuade you and Jeffrey to give us a little bit of the Lucy verse spoken word piece. And if you want to set this up, go ahead and let's hear it.
All right. Well, we're going to ask for your indulgence because we weren't fully prepared for a full-blown rehearsed performance.
We like our ambushes here.
But we'll take your ambush and we'll try to raise you. But
would you like to talk about the pieces, how they relate?
Yeah, basically there's 4 pieces to the 4 movements to the suite. The first is the Dragonfly Song, which is sort of a call to the ancestors and a prayer from the ancestors for enlightenment for our descendants yet to come.
That's our opening theme today, guys.
Exactly. And then the second piece is
a different one.
The second piece is actually part of the will contest. It's a closing argument for love, and it's presented from the voice of the lawyer who is trying to understand what is this arrangement and what is it that Lucy could do. The third piece is the Lucy's Lament, in which Lucy, whose voice was specifically and legally disregarded in the original transcript of the file, is given a voice and a chance to express herself. And the fourth piece is called Testify, which was based actually on a song that Jeffrey had written some years ago, that really gives a chance for a final call to action for each of us to do something in our lives to personally take charge and responsibility. So
well, let's hear it, guys.
Do you want to?
When I was in darkness, you held out a hand, lifted me higher so I'd understand. What I called a mountain was only a hill I could get over by using my will. I'ma testify to love. I'ma testify to love. I'ma testify to love. I'm never gonna lie. To love, I'm gonna testify. Ready? Hard times come, the journey is tough. When there is no diamond within all the rough, we sow the seeds of happy in our deepest hurt and pain, and muster our forces to rise up again. I'ma testify to love. I'ma testify to love. I'ma testify to love. I'm never gonna lie.
To love, I'm gonna testify. To love, I'm gonna testify, testify, testify. To love, I'm gonna testify, testify, testify. To love, I'm gonna testify, testify, testify.
To love,
I ain't never gonna lie.
no, no.
To love, I'm gonna testify.
Bravo. Bravo.
There's a little rap in there that Terry has.
Yeah, we left out the rap, but if you
go for it, do a little rap.
As to the duration of John's determination to set those Negroes free, old Sutton told Yale they'd all come from Georgia, 100 miles with 400 cows, Florida bound and determined to unbind their vows of slavery. Under the impression he could secure the manumission of these persons of color here, but only to discover from his sons, the two older brothers, that the state of Florida, like the state of Georgia, was not a state in which they could enjoy a state of freedom. And as to John's brother who challenged the will, Shadrach who claimed that John had been ill and wandering in his intellect, he lost. Crabtree ordered him to pay $28.08 in costs. So now, having heard the evidence presented and the record has been seen, this court must consider what did it all mean? What was Lucy to John and what was he to her? Consider the state of the record herein. It is stipulated and agreed that John Sutton owned Lucy and all her kin and that John never had a proper wife and wife children. But consider the evidence that never came in. What was it that led Lucy to lead her family to freedom? How was it that Lucy could bear what she'd borne? What was it caused a woman to make a man make a move for freedom? What was it got that will marked by John? What made a clerk seize one last file to load on a boat in the River St. John to save from the conflagration that time, the great fire of Jacksonville of 1901 that burned everything else from noon sun to sundown? Save the probate file of John Sutton so you could hear Lucy's words, disinterred, re-emerged from the river Lethe, a phoenix redeemed and birthed from the fire, one woman's disregarded words undisregarded. What was that? And what was it that brought Lucy to me as I chanted on my knees for enlightenment from my ancestors as to how I could be me and still have my family? Yes, John Sutton owned me is true, but I reckon you could say that in a certain way that I owned him too, leastwise the portion of me that refused to be owned. What was it set me down to write these words I leave behind to those who read it from this moment to 3,000 realms of time beyond? And at last, what will free us all if we can just be brave enough to let it.
Wow.
Well, I feel very lucky to have heard that. It's not what people might have expected to tuning into Hidden History Happy Hour podcast with Alex and Bryan, but my God, we are really lucky to have had it, and this podcast has surpassed itself. I have always believed, since I saw, the interest in revolutionary France that wouldn't exist, but amongst some people, but for Les Miserables, or the interest in the Vietnam War, so significant for people even in our lifetime, but would not have been elevated but for Miss Saigon. I've always believed in the power of music to attract a different audience and to excite people in a different way. And to state the obvious, Hamilton has made that abundantly clear for a new generation. But I tell you that I thought that was really quite special, and I'm very glad to have, particularly because of what it means to you, Terry. But also musically, I thought it was fantastic. So, and for you guys just to have hit it cold, a cappella, no music with you, I really want to say thank you. I thought that was great.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity, and hopefully it'll touch somebody. And
oh, I bet you it will.
It
can
will.
I ask you? I picked out one thing in as you were, because I didn't know this before. From in the rap, you mentioned that there was a fire, and many of the documents that this would otherwise have been with would have been lost. So there was in the relevant archive, there was a fire but this file survived.
The courthouse was burned down.
There was a great fire of Jacksonville in 1901 that burned everything else, literally almost from noon until 8 o'clock that day. But the story that's been told is that after I first saw the documents, I told lawyers who were in Florida, and they said, "Oh, we're going to go to court and get those documents for you." They went and they petitioned the court, and the judge who made the decision was a descendant of one of the founding fathers of the city of Jacksonville.
Unbelievable.
He told the story of how there was a court clerk who loaded a bunch of files on a boat in the St. Johns River that saved those files from the Great Fire. And I have to believe that this file that I now have, these 48 pages that tell my ancestors' story that was disregarded through history, it survived so we could be here to have this conversation, so we could share this with your listeners.
It's amazing.
Fantastic.
Whatever your beliefs are, it's hard to deny that there's something operating in the universe that we don't understand and that is stronger than all of us. But, to that end, what's next for Lucy's story?
Part of what we're trying to convey with all of this, with the musical piece and with the piece that we're working on with the people at Lionsgate, is to spark people who live today, their imagination, that they can do something today that can make a difference 170 years in the future.
Yeah.
Right.
And what you do today has an impact 170 years in the future. So to get people to spark their imagination and get them to be maybe a little more mindful.
Well, I look forward to seeing this on stage one day, and I'm sure that I will. Interestingly, your story, of course, has another quiet hero. I told in Lessons from History 2, I told the story of the librarian who saved the manuscript copy of the Brandenburg concertos. The quiet hero in your story is the librarian who saved the manuscript, because otherwise you wouldn't know some of these facts. You just wouldn't have, would you?
This court clerk said, "Oh, I've got to get these files. The city's burning." We wouldn't know. And without my great aunt turning 100, which is what inspired me to go on this search for these documents too. So each person played a role, and that's one of the points that I make in the TED Talk.
Ask yourself this, guy. And by the way, I'm going to go away and listen to that TED Talk again with a new musical lens.
Yeah, and we'll put that in the show notes.
Ask yourself this, and it may make a neat epilogue or something to mention in the program when you guys are on stage with this. Think of the stories that cannot be told because those files weren't saved. For everyone that can be told, there is a tantalizing lost story, because when that clerk saved those files, that person wasn't able to distinguish one from another, and there may be great stories almost as good as yours that are now lost to us because of the fire in 1901.
So guys, this is it's very moving. It's provocative in the sense that Alex mentioned of how many stories aren't told. What are some other ways that you're trying to tell the story and you're trying to go around the country and make people aware?
As you were saying, the Oakland Symphony Chorus was going to be doing this tour, and I think they still have plans for this Freedom Tour that stops at different points, including the Memorial for Peace and Justice in Alabama, and it was going to go to Atlanta and DC as well. I think they're still trying to put that together. But one of the reasons that this was so inspiring to us is that we were approached to work on this commission piece for the Oakland Symphony Chorus at the time when Maestro Michael Morgan was still alive, and we were going to do this. He passed away as we were in the midst of working on it, but he'd always been a person who he was a groundbreaking Black conductor of orchestras who put together a national Black orchestra. But then for the Oakland Symphony, he really brought the community in because he thought that was so fundamentally important. So it was about making music accessible to everybody in the community, and then also expanding the concept of what orchestra music or symphonic music is.
Sounds fantastic. You are wise to aim for the community aspect because, of course, any franchise in Oakland only has a ticking time bomb before it's stolen by San Francisco or somebody else, just like all the sports franchises.
It's like being a AAA baseball coach. You know that your guy's going to be pulled up or your lady's
It's a good reference from a Brit, right? It's that's good knowledge.
Well played. Yeah. Well, it's great to have you guys back, Terry, have our viewers see you and all of your nattiness. And Jeffrey, it's great to have you on our first musical episode. Next week, by the way, I will be playing the full drum solo from Whiplash on our episode. So
what a treat to look forward to. I'm not sure I can make that one. We haven't agreed what it is yet, but I don't think I can make it.
I'm pretty sure you can. And ladies and gentlemen, all kidding aside, if you're anywhere near London on 23 February, go on the Evite that's in our show notes, sign up. Alex is going to be signing books. I'm going to be playing a drum solo, probably on, kitchen accoutrement. It's going to be great. Terry, Jeffrey, thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
We'll not wait another year to have you on again. And ladies and gentlemen, cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. Great to be here.
The ancestors, they sing to me like a siren song. The ancestors, they call my name all the whole day long. The ancestors, they sing to me in a siren song. The strings of hope, they